Oh, hello there, everyone. Make sure that door is shut. My name is Luke Thomas. This is the weekly MMA fighting, well, my live chat on MMA fighting. I don't know what you want to call it exactly. 1.5 hours of your questions, comments, bitches, gripes, and smart-ass remarks. It will take place on MMAfighting.com where this little window is embedded. So if you want to be a part of the action, there's a lot of questions already. You may do so at MMAfighting.com where the live chat post is working, or you can follow me on Twitter at SBNLukeThomas. Either of those will work. You can also email me at luke.thomas@sbnation.com. Today, we'll probably talk a little bit about UFC Fight Night 44. We'll talk a little bit about Vitor Belfort, I'm sure. We'll talk a little bit about Mayweather Maidana, if you want. We'll talk about Glory 16 and all the stuff therein. So, be a part of the action if you would be so inclined. Please, if you would do me the honor, let folks know you're watching right now. Whenever you see this call to action, please respond. That means tell people on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever, that you're watching. Link up either the video or the post itself. Just let folks know you're watching because I need your support to make this work. Any other things I need to get off my chest as a preview? I don't think so. As you can see, I'm back in the broom closet because Vox Media is growing at a rate that is alarming, in a good way alarming, but certainly alarming. So there's actually no conference rooms available today. Back to the broom closet, y'all. So what happens is I looked at the thing. There's like almost 300 questions or comments anyway, before we've even gotten started. So I'm going to try to answer as many as I can without giving superfluous, dumb answers. And of course, it wouldn't be a live chat if I wasn't checking my phone at the same time. All right, we're good. All right, so here we go. Live chat sponsorships. Have you ever thought about getting sponsorships for your live chat? Ever thought about accepting donations as well? Well, you know, it's funny. I would sell the live chat if it could be sold, which I'm not saying it couldn't be. I think it can be, but I don't know if it's something on the radar right now. I'm not, that's up to the sales team. I worry about other things. I'm not one of these guys who can do all of that. That's a mission that we'll let sales worry about. MMA beat too. As far as accepting donations, like on the one hand, I'm not above accepting donations. On the other hand, I feel like it's such a, I don't know, Salvation Army kind of thing. Like, people are just bringing you things because it's so obvious you have nothing. Not that I hide that. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Just email me, luke.thomas@sbnation.com. I don't know what the answer to that is. Let's see. Oh my God, there's. Okay, here we go. Matt Brown is almost a 2-to-1 underdog against Silva. Is that way off? 2-to-1. Well, odds are often wrong if that's what you're asking. Odds are often very wrong. Odds are more often right. I mean, the house usually wins, right? But 2-to-1, I don't think that's crazy. I don't think that's crazy. I mean, maybe it's a little high, but not alarmingly high. I think the reality is Silva's a very fast starter. Brown is not. That creates a lot of problems. Brown is a bit of a stronger finisher. That creates some problems for Silva. But it's always, not always, it's typically better to be a fast starter against a slow starter than the reverse. I think Silva's the better athlete. I think, Brown fighting in his hometown is nice, but that might be more pressure. Probably not. He's too much of a veteran of the game. But in other words, I don't think there's any benefits conferred necessarily from fighting at home. And I think Brown has plenty of KO ability, but I would give the power edge to Silva. I'd give the wrestling edge to Silva too. So not substantial edges, but the question is 2-to-1 way off? Way off, I don't know. Off, maybe. Slightly off, probably, but I don't know if it's way off. Who do you think will most likely lose their current UFC title first? Barao or Aldo? And Yumi says, I mean, through losing the fight, not giving up their title because they want to move divisions. Well, I don't think either is particularly likely. but if I had to wager a guess, I'd say Aldo. I think featherweight is probably a little more stacked than bantamweight. You know, Barrow's fighting T.J. Dillashaw next. Certainly, Dominic Cruz is always lingering out there after 2 years. It's just impossible to say where he is. Maybe he goes back in there and crushes Barrow. I don't know. But without having seen him, I'm a little hesitant to say whether he's this or that. I just don't know. So that just remains a question mark, not really a known commodity. In terms of known commodities, I don't think Barrow can be touched. In terms of Aldo, I don't think he can really be touched that much either. But I could see how somebody like, I mean, he's starting to recycle guys, right? Guys are at a point now where they're getting second shots at him, and with Chad Mendes. And so you have to wonder, guys are getting better since then. I still think Aldo's better than the guys he's already beaten, but Mendes has gotten better in that time than Aldo has. Not aggregately, but relatively, right? He's improved more than Aldo has improved. They've both improved, but Aldo was already so far ahead, there wasn't a lot of space left to get tremendously better. There was a lot of room for growth for Mendes. So there's that. They have the experience of fighting, and they know what he feels like. They've seen his movements a little bit. You can see a case where those guys might give Aldo a harder time, but honestly, realistically, I mean, it's sort of a crazy question. Like, you know, it's not a situation where there's a strong degree of likelihood in either case, so you're sort of debating a real hypothetical. Let's see. Jones's strategy versus Gustafsson in the rematch. Luke, do you think John Jones will be more inclined to fight Gus in the rematch like he did Glover in their fight? Seeing as how Gus's footwork and boxing gave Jones problems in the first fight, I think using the clinch like Jones did versus Glover would be a good strategy versus Gus and a clear path to victory for Jones. To the extent he can do that, sure. But one thing that Gustafsson is going to want to avoid is that. He's going to want to use his footwork. He's going to want to use his boxing. He's going to want to use his distance. He's going to want to manage real estate between the two. And the question is, like who has more adjustments to make from the first fight? John Jones does. And in some ways that's a curse because you have to figure out what to do, but it's also a blessing because you have more latitude. Certainly Gustafsson can do some things differently too. Both guys definitely can. But who has more room to make adjustments? It's John Jones, right? Not because he's smarter necessarily. I do think he is, but that's not what I'm talking about. It's usually the guy who, like John Jones, I think won that fight, but he spent a huge portion of that fight fighting out of a deficit. And so you have to wonder, right, because he won the fourth round, but he didn't win the majority of the fourth round, if that makes sense, right? He really hurt and rocked Gustafsson, so that's why he took it. But if you're just sort of looking at a clock and you were timing it, Gustafsson won the majority of that round in terms of time management. So to me, I think Jones has more adjusting to do. If he can keep it in close, great. I think he can give Gustafsson all kinds of problems, at least more so than necessarily being on the outside. So what he's going to have to do is find a way to manage the outside himself, find a way to close the distance, and then find a way to keep the Gustafsson close to him. That's going to be sort of the trick here. And I think what you're going to look for out of Gustafsson is not just a jab, right, where he's planning in front of you and he's jabbing and cutting off at an angle. I don't mean that necessarily, although I think you will see that. What I'm looking for, I was thinking about this the other day, what I'm looking for is for him to jab and step backwards at the same time. Not at the same time exactly, but like pop and move back. Pop. Now, so you're popping them, cutting off at an angle, and taking a step back after you pop them to manage real estate. Like what Anderson Silva never had good takedown defense. Better towards the end of his career, or the last few fights, gave Chris Weidman a little bit of some trouble along the fence there for a couple of those exchanges, but historically has had really bad takedown defense, particularly like the middle of the cage. I think he's better against the fence. He's a little worse in the middle. But like, how was he able to manage distance so well? If you look at it, he was cutting angles off the jab, but he was also hitting the jab, cutting an angle, and then stepping out. So he's popping them, cutting an angle, and then backing out. Right? That's hard to do and really effective in mixed martial arts. Really effective. So I wonder if that's what Gustafsson's going to be doing. Is not just popping and moving, and always opening the pocket. Always opening the pocket. because you know Jones is going to have to follow at some point, right? So I think that's what I'm looking for. And I think you're right. If Gustafsson can get caught up in Jones's clinch, it's a very different fight the second time around. But it's a question of getting there and then keeping him there. Clinch breaking is a skill. It's a skill about how you break it, what methods you use, keeping your hands up on the break. So many guys in MMA get clipped on the outside of a clinch break because they come out with their hands down. So many guys. There's a tricks of the trade to clinch break. So that's sort of what I'm looking for, is Gustafsson not just popping the jab, popping and moving, always creating space. Always. And how John Jones is going to overcome that, I don't know. We're going to see. Miocic versus Maldonado. Without being too crass, specifically, what type of brain injury do you expect Fabio Maldonado to incur at the hands of Stipe Miocic? On a more serious note, how can the UFC in good conscience put a middling, smallish light heavyweight in a short notice fight against a top 10 heavyweight? They can do it because CAB MMA approved it, for whatever that's worth. In my judgment, not a whole lot. Secondly, because it was born out of necessity. It's a gross fight. I didn't make a lot of comment about it yesterday, and whatever. If these guys want to get paid and do it, and they can get it legally sanctioned, what is there really to say about it? Except that Maldonado is like literally telling the media, I'm going to do things that are terrible for my health, more injurious in a way than normal, even for this particular occupation. And the media is like, yeah. Like me, it's like, ugh, UFC's got to do what they got to do. They got to make fights. Again, it went through CAB MMA for whatever that's worth. And I guess Maldonado will fight at like sub 230. I don't think there'll be a dramatic weight disadvantage, but Maldonado is literally just trading on his health as a way of generating income, and they're all doing that. But he's doing it even to a alarming degree. That's the word of the day, I guess. Alarming, even to an alarming degree in that chosen field. Like even among fighters, they're like, "Damn, that dude is taking a whooping." That's sort of what he does. If you like that kind of thing, you're in luck, I guess. It's not for me. UFC Fight Night 40, which is Saturday's fight. What's the point? What is the point of UFC Fight Night 40? Seriously. I don't even want to get too much into oversaturation, but frankly, this is a borderline offensive offering from the UFC. I am a hardcore MMA fan, and I am not even slightly interested in this event, and I can't imagine who would be. Ruan Potts and Luis Smolka are on main card UFC fighters. I thought Potts versus Pelelia was on the prelim card. Am I wrong about that? Hold on. Let me pull this joker up here. And I'll answer this question too, because it's something I was thinking about earlier. Let's see here. Yeah, Pelelia versus Potts is on the main card. Oh, right, you were right. I'm sorry, I was wrong. I don't know who either of those people are. Smolka fought on the one of the Tough China shows, I think. No, Macau shows. What does the UFC expect out of these shows? They expect you to show up and pay money for them. Like, here's the deal. What I sort of realized after all the banter that I provided the last year about oversaturation, I don't think I'm wrong necessarily. I think in the end, this is more than the market can bear in the long run, and however long that is, we're going to find out. But we all have different appetites for oversaturation, and maybe I reached a point of oversaturation as a fan more than others have. Jesus Christ. What is the 585 area code? Buffalo. Anyway. And so I reached a point of oversaturation a little bit more. I do think that the ratings reflect, particularly on shows like The Ultimate Fighter. I know it's on a different platform, but I definitely feel like there's just objective evidence that a significant portion of the audience, generally, absent me, feel a certain way about that show as well, and other shows, the Fight Night shows too. And there's been a bit of a leveling out to a decline of the pay-per-view buy rates, but Here's all I can tell you. Look, for me, there's not a lot salvageable about UFC Fight Night 40. I'm speaking to you as a fan because I came to this position from a fan. I mean, yes, I have an occupation that I have to fulfill, but if I'm looking at this card like a fan, there's not a significant amount that interests me here. You know, my reality, I'll say it one time, I'll say it 1,000. There are only 10 top 10 guys in each weight class. That's it. You can't have 20 or 30 top 10 guys in a weight class. And I am much more interested in watching the top 10 of any particular division compete than I am in watching the top 25 guys. There are some exceptions. There's some room for debate about that. I understand. But my general point is that I like seeing if I'm accustomed to a certain standard from an organization, I like seeing that standard met. I don't like seeing the standard have a hard time fulfill itself. That's sort of how I look at it. People are like, how can you watch Bellator? Well, Bellator is easier to watch. I can DVR it, and I don't expect much from it. My expectations are very low. If they meet those, great. My expectations for the UFC are high. They're very, very high, as well they should be. They're the ones who set them. And so for me, if it doesn't match it, I don't have a lot of interest. Here's the issue, though. The UFC has done an extraordinary job at cultivating fan loyalty. I mentioned it before. Who was the prelims? Like, I think it was Baroni versus Tavares years ago. I could be wrong about that, but I remember they went to Ion for the first time. Remember that? They went to Ion, and they drew something like 750,000 people on a network that has basically a zero share for ratings. And I've told this story before. I talked to a producer in TV, and they were saying just how utterly incredible it was that UFC could do that. They could go to a network that no one had even heard of, their fan base had never watched once, and they could draw 750,000 people for a prelim portion of a pay-per-view card. I mean, insane what they can do. They have cultivated an unbelievable loyalty. Either you send them a message that this is not something you're willing to do, or you don't. If you're a fan and you don't like this, the sun will rise tomorrow. It's not going to impugn your ability to follow the sport. I actually think fans are wrong about that. You can catch it on Fight Pass later. You can DVR it. Maybe just watch it on DVR later. Fast forward through stuff that you don't care about, and then sort of move on through your day. If they come to your town and you don't want to see it, don't pay money for it. You know, I'm not telling you to boycott the UFC. I'm telling you to vote with your dollars, right? I can only get out here and use my occupation for what I think would be best for me as a fan and for the sport, and I can be wrong about all of it, but all I can do is come up here and talk to you earnestly. You can do that as a fan even more effectively than I can by voting with your dollars. If it doesn't interest you, don't watch it. If it does, keep watching it. If they come to your town, this card isn't the kind of card you're willing to pay money for, don't pay money for it. Don't pay money for something and then cry about it. Don't watch it and then cry about it, right? I mean, you know, unless it's like really bad action at some point and you have to wonder what's going on with the product. But you get the idea. Like, if you know going into it you're not going to like it, don't watch it. You have to send a message as a consumer. And if you keep watching stuff that you don't like and you keep paying for stuff you don't like, how are they supposed to know to make any changes? It's not about hating UFC or hating MMA. It's sending the message back as a consumer. We like this. Please more of that. We don't like that. Please less of that. It's not a matter of an allegiance to a brand necessarily. It's an allegiance to a certain kind of product, a certain quality of product. And either you tell them or you don't. And if you don't complain when the product doesn't change. Simple as that. That goes for your cell phone technology. That goes for your cable provider. That goes for the UFC. That goes for your local hometown team here in DC, Wizards, Nationals, whatever. If you got a problem with what they're doing, you need to tell them as a consumer. They have to have feedback, and they get enough of it, they start making changes. Or if they don't do anything. It's really the sort of bottom line. But don't look at a card and say, I have no interest in this, and be like, well, I'm just going to watch it anyway. Well, then you're the problem. You are the problem at that point. I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but for folks out there, I talk to a lot of them. It's like, well, I watched it, but I just didn't really want to. Then don't. Catch up on it later. DVR it, whatever you got to do to find out about it later. Send them a message about what kind of content you expect out of them. Or don't. Either way, whatever feedback you provide is going to shape the product in the future. It's true that the UFC has a very loyal audience. It's also true that they listen to their audience, I think, more than people give them credit for. They are attuned to what the fan base is thinking. In some ways not, because I think they're expanding the product more than what they've been asked to do, but in some ways they do. So, send them. And I see folks arguing. This is what I like to see, actually. I like to see folks going back and forth. But someone says they're free, don't complain. I think you really should be able to complain about a free card. I'll disagree with you there. People are like, oh, it's free, you can't complain. No, you can. You can. Like, these events don't exist in a vacuum, right? They don't exist, like, I don't think putting on one bad event or one really good event that may not get noticed is going to change the trajectory of the sport, but in an accumulated way, they do. They do matter. If you put out enough subpar things, even if they're free, you begin to get a reputation for it. Are we at that point? Highly debatable. Maybe not. Maybe we are. I'm not really here to say that one way or the other. The evidence isn't particularly clear. What I am trying to say to you is that it's not okay for a company to say, here's a free product. We are above reproach. Doesn't work that way. The product can be free, and you certainly have to take that into account. But the nature of whether it's free or not free does not define its value. Free is a part of the value, but the rest of it still has to deliver, because you may not be spending financial dollars, but you're spending time dollars. You're spending opportunity cost. What else could you have been doing on your evening where you watched UFC events and you didn't do something else? Maybe you told friends that you didn't want to go because you really want to see that Matt Brown fight. Maybe you told your wife, we'll go on a date next week. Maybe you told your kids, I'll read to you next time. Whatever it was that you did. It's true you're not spending money, and that's a big component. But it's not true that because it's free, it's above judgment. So it can be free, and that matters, but that doesn't settle the issue of whether or not there's still a cost to you. There's still a cost. It just isn't financial. Luke, pick a winner. Weidman versus Machida. I'm going to go with Weidman. I'm feeling a little more confident about it, but it's a close one. Lawler versus Ellenberger. That's tough. I'll go with Lawler, though. Matt Brown versus Silva. I got my predictions coming out on Saturday. I don't know yet. It's a tough one, man. It's a tough one. I'm going to go with Silva probably, but I reserve the right to change my vote. Koch versus Cruikshank. Koch. Mizugaki versus Rivera. Tough one. I might go Mizugaki. Rivera could bang, though. I'll probably go Mizugaki. I see someone posted the photo that Ryan Loco took of me. So someone made fun of me there. If you saw the Glory 16 broadcast, seriously, there was a moment there where, like, you guys don't see it. If you buy the online version and you get to watch the Super Fight series, I did all the post-fight interviews for those, and I felt really good about them. They were smooth, quick, in and out, boom, 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 done, no sweat, right? And then I did a couple of those on the main card broadcast. In general, I thought those went okay. It was the stuff that I did backstage where I was just like, oh my God, what happened here? And I know why it happened. It's hard to explain. I know exactly what went wrong, and I should have corrected for it beforehand, and I didn't. So there's a portion of the 16 broadcast where I'm backstage, and I'm like, and that's totally the absolute focus. After I said that, I seriously was like, where is the nearest shotgun? Because I need to eat. I wanted to put a bullet in my mouth so badly. I was horrified that I went on camera and did that. In the end, I don't know that it ruined the broadcast or made it one way or the other, you know. But Jesus Christ, man, if you don't think after that I want to just die inside, oh my God. And if you watch the Glory 14 broadcast in Croatia, I never did anything like that. And I'm confident it won't happen again, but at the same time, oh my God, when I did that, I was like, "What? You are such a loser." I was like, "You are such a loser." Anyway, so I deserve all your ridicule, is what I'm saying. And heap it on me. I should eat it more. All right, everyone loves a repeat question. Oh, Jesus Christ. Who are you the highest on, and do you see as a potential UFC champion? At flyweight, Bagotina versus Cejudo? Neither. Bantamweight, Michael McDonald. Featherweight, Conor McGregor. Lightweight, Khabib Nurmagomedov. Welterweight, Gunnar Nelson. Middleweight, Michael Page. No, not at all Michael Page. And then Drysdale, Minikov, and Holm. Easily Nurmagomedov. Easily. Luke, are you a noob MMA fan? Time and again, I have seen you peer down your nose at MMA fans who pay attention to trash talk between fighters, frequently telling us how you don't give an F about trash talk. And yet you can't even contain your excitement over the back and forth between Cole Miller and Conor McGregor. Has the great Luke Thomas finally been duped by the UFC Fight Machine? If you think for 2 seconds I think any of that is real, you're crazy. Of course I know it's not real. And it's true that 99% of the time, I don't care about trash talk. There are exceptions abound, I guess. In this particular case, these two are elevating it to a level of performance art. That's what that is. It's performance art. It's performance art. And the truth of the matter is, Cole Miller or not, Conor McGregor is an interesting prospect. Not just because of he could be a potential title contender one day, maybe, we'll see, but because of what he represents for UFC's hopes in an emerging market. And so he's sort of interesting in that way, and the way in which he's sort of enraged other guys heightens those stakes a little bit. The difference for me this particular time is that I thought the degree of the trash talk, like, if you're going to do it, you need to do it in such a way where you leave no wiggle room for embarrassment if you lose. Like, you have to absolutely faceplant. And that's what these guys have done. If they lose, it's not real, but it certainly has a way of just bleeding over into reality. If they lose, the egg on their face is just unavoidable. And I thought that the things they were saying to each other were cruel. Totally cruel. Every one of these guys who normally gets it is just like, well, I'm gonna undermine his resume in some sort of meaningless way, or, he's never faced anybody like me. Conor McGregor was outright saying, like, dude, they brought you in to lose to me. And then saying things like good girl. I mean, like, totally emasculating things. And he may wind up getting submitted, on his hometown. Like, these kinds of things, I was interested in the fight no matter what because of what Conor McGregor represents. And I don't know if Cole Miller's got a future necessarily in trash talking, but if you're going to throw yourself on the altar of trash talk and hope that it works, you might as well do it all out. And if you're going to do it all out, it looks kind of like that. And again, other guys may try and it may reach that level and not work. I thought the Rampage Rashad stuff was just like beyond tedious, beyond tedious. But every once in a while, I will allow for guys, if they can raise the pre-fight ire to a level of performance art, I will give it a pass. In this particular case, I was already interested in seeing what happened. I think Cole Miller is actually a good test for McGregor when he returns. I wouldn't put it past. I still favor McGregor, but I wouldn't put it past Miller to win at all. And so to me, there's already super interesting about that. And the amount of however phony, and it's pretty phony, however phony the vitriol. It has a way of bleeding over and raising the already fairly heightened stakes here. Mayweather Maidana. What did you think and how did you score it? I think I had it 115, 113. I think that's how I had it. What are the chances Mayweather is going to agree to a rematch for his next fight? 0. Or in the near future, and if it happens, do you think it'll be as close as this one? There's no way he's going to do a rematch. He said that in the ring, but in the end, everyone was sort of complaining about that score. Because there was one draw. By the way, how funny is it that he had a draw in this fight and a draw in the last fight? It shows you how stupid CJ Ross is. I would say the scores were close, and Maidana did better than people expected. The right guy won. It's all right to have a close scorecard. You can have a 116, 112. It's fine. You can have a 114, 114. I think I had a 115, 113. That's fine. The right guy won. I think if Maidana had won, it would not have been fair. He was winning early, but he wasn't winning late. I think Mayweather's like amazing because he never really has to have a game plan. He just has to have an ability to survive early rounds, and then that's it. He just adjusts around you. He makes adjustments in the fight. Whatever you give him, whatever you show him, You have to take away, he takes away from you. Like if you want to beat Mayweather, you have to have one game plan for the early rounds, and then you have to have a game plan for his adjustments. And I don't really know how you do that. I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you adjust around his adjustments if you're not Mayweather, because he keeps adjusting off of it. You have to have a fight IQ that's just you're forcing him into bad decisions, and I don't really know how you do that in boxing. It's a little easier to do in MMA because there's so many weapons, but in boxing with a limited amount of weapons and space, I don't know how you do that. I really don't know how you beat this guy, except sting him and hurt him early and make him suffer and make him make bad decisions. But if you can't really land on the guy early, that's about it for you. Luke, you are a supporter of more easy tune-up fights like boxing and UFC and MMA, but aren't you concerned about the fighter's health and safety on the other end? What I don't like about boxing is the misleading records that have been polished on behalf of washed-up fighters who only show up to get knocked out or take a dive. I think the evolution of boxing is sad, and I don't want to see that in MMA at all. Sure, if it gets to that point, I'll have some more issues about it. But so far, I haven't seen guys who have been thrashed repeatedly, except for this Maldonado-Miocic fight, which, by the way, should be a bit of a tune-up fight for Miocic. That might be a case where he gets a little bit different. But in a case like Corisani versus Poirier, like Corisani isn't like so beat up and shot-worn that he falls into that category. That's not really what I'm talking about here. Who did Holloway? I mean, I even thought Holloway facing Choate was that same kind of thing. So yes, if it gets to the point where you're in Miocic versus Maldonado territory, it might get a little troublesome. But so far, the UFC's filled with such young guys that I don't feel like they've done that at all. You know. Also, that is sort of a portion of the game. I mean, Jesus. The game eats its elderly. In fight sports, the young eat the elderly. It's pretty gross practice, but it's the one we're in. What are your thoughts on Nate Diaz being removed from the UFC rankings? TJ Grant was removed too. Thoughts on the rankings in general? I haven't contributed to them. I never have. I can't imagine a scenario where I do. For any number of reasons. It's too much time. They've got panelists on there who don't have a clue about what they're doing. Their ballots are ridiculous. Shout-outs to McKinley Noble for making that all known. He's unofficial UFC rankings police and does a great job at it. I don't want to be part of their kinds of whims about how they. I mean, you know, you could say he's inactive, and I guess in some sense he is. But like when you're telling ESPN that you removed him because he's not taking fights, well, he's not taking fights because his contract sucks, right? That's not the same as just saying, you know, he's healthy, ready to go, everything's hunky dory. It's not. There's some problems afoot, and it's sort of there's no way to call him inactive without having some sort of relationship to a contract dispute. They're connected, and so I don't want to be associated with that, and I never did. I didn't know that it would even come to this, to be honest. It's a bit surprising, but it's fine, man. If guys want to do it, it's great. I have no interest at all. Dana was overly critical about the fight on Tough 19, even though the fight was quite exciting in my opinion. During the fight, he called for a stand-up when one of the fighter had mount positions. Later, the fighter gets back control, and Dana complains that he wants to go for a choke with 10 seconds left. Did you see the fight, and did you think that Dana's opinions on the fight were very inconsistent? The fight could have been a guy he liked. He would have had no problem with it. Well, I don't know about the consistency issue. I saw the fight. I didn't think it was particularly good either. It's not it's not low-level professional MMA, but it's not high-level, right? It's a pretty easy argument for me. What level of MMA are we watching, and on what platform are we watching it? Like Chandler and Alvarez get a pass, not just because we think they can compete with people in the UFC, but because they outsize Bellator. It's the truth, you know. It's almost like how do those guys end up there? The reverse is also true. When I know they're not in the UFC yet, but they're wearing UFC gloves. It's a UFC show. You know, what is your appetite for watching clearly lower level MMA? Because that's what you're watching. Like if someone told you, okay, I need you to watch this fight, and you only knew a very little bit about mixed martial arts. Maybe you saw years ago that 60 Minutes report, right? Maybe you've seen a couple fights here or there. That's it. Never paid attention to it, never cared. And you skipped the whole show, you didn't even know it was part of a show, you just watched the fight. What would you say? You would say this is low-level professional MMA, or mid-level, whatever you want to call it. But it's not UFC-level professional MMA. So what is it? You know, I actually saw this week's episode, so I can't say anything. Anyway, wait, are we talking about the Douglas Lima fight? Is that what we're talking about? I don't know. Anyway, the one I'm talking about was the two, I think, heavyweights, and I went 2 rounds, and it was just sort of a boring lay and pray fest. I didn't find it particularly appealing either. You can achieve dominant positions, mount back, and it still not be a great fight. Like those don't necessarily indicate you're watching greatness. Just what indicates that someone's achieving superior positions. Wing Chun and MMA and street fights. I couldn't possibly answer this question, nor do I care to. Sorry. All right, true or false? King Mo would have been way better if he had stuck with American Kickboxing Academy. False. Weidman versus Machida will mostly play out on the feet. False. Strikers, as opposed to grapplers, have more time to set things up. False. Bruce Lee should have never been in the UFC game because of the sport's integrity. It's a video game. Rogan has some of the best kicks in MMA. Probably not. Dana would love to have more journalists like you. Probably not. Ground fighters don't get enough time to pass or strike by the referee. True. If Sambo was easy, they would call it jiu-jitsu. That's ridiculous. Habib versus one of the Diaz brothers would be an easy fight for Habib. I don't know about easy, but I would favor Habib. Takedowns in most BJJ schools are neglected. True. Am I excited for Miocic versus Maldonado? Not even a little bit. Also, who is on that card? I mean, look, that's your headliner? Let's see here. Who was on that card? Boy, that is a nubs card. Pedro Munoz returns. I'm interested in seeing him, I guess. Paulo Thiago, Gossen, Molotov, Diego Brandao. Yeah, I mean, this is a bad card. Someone says, I don't understand how you can view middle school bickering as performance art. That was embarrassing to listen to on Monday. Middle school bickering. Yeah, but like middle school bickering is immature, and this is too. But like people in middle school, like sometimes their emotions are raw and undeveloped, but they're real. This isn't even real. You know, this is just guys trying to do shtick. I don't know. At some point, if the shtick is if they commit to the bit enough, it's impossible to deny, right? Who was the most and least fluent in spoken English among these 4 Brazilians? Which was the most, I guess? Then Dos Santos, then Machida, then Silva. Maybe then Silva, then Machida. I don't know. Are you interested in the Eddie Bravo Metamoris documentary? Very. I want to see Royce Gracie get all upset and you mad in his face. I want to see his side of things and some preparation. Sure, I want to see all that. Definitely. Aside from Jones Gustafson 2, what fight are you excited for the most in 2014? Got to be Machida Weidman, boy. Got to be Machida Weidman. What was your reaction when you heard Vitor say, "The Holy Spirit gives me everything"? Well, considering that I believe that there probably is no God, and that when you die, you just die, I found it very, very funny. Let's see. True or false? I'll do one more of these and we'll call it quits for true or false. Fabio gets crushed by Stipe, probably. Mendez revenges his loss to Aldo. False. Paddy Pimblett gets an offer from the UFC for his amazing flying triangle and Cage Warriors. He might. There will not be a fighters union in your lifetime. True. Tisha Torres wins Tough 20. False. Matt Brown will KO or TKO Silva. It's possible. I don't know. I don't know. The Spider returns before 3:15. Sure. Jones KOs Gustafson before round 4. False. Betch Correa TKO over Shayna Baszler. True. King can't fight in UFC 180, so interim belt fight is made. God, I hope not. Jesus. Dana White has anger management issues. Potentially. Cyborg will never get to fight in the UFC. I'll say false. So Korean Zombie says he's coming back in around August or September this year. Who do you think he should get? Someone took the words right out of my mouth. A Poirier rematch. God, I would love to see that. That first fight was in my hometown. Sort of. Olympic gold medal judoka Satoshi Ishii to the UFC. Ishii is an Olympic gold medal judoka. He even beat Teddy, I never pronounced his last name right, but Teddy Reiner, who's this monster Frenchman. On an 8-fight win streak with the latest win against Phil DeFries. Trains at Reign MMA. UFC heavyweight division is probably the shallowest. Big draw in Japan when the UFC is trying to sign fighters for local markets. What do you think the holdup is? Does he want too much money, not UFC caliber? Do you think he could be a contender? If he was in the division, is he one of the biggest prospects outside of the UFC? There was a while there where Satoshi Ishii, remember he came to the States in UFC gear, and Dana White was like, whatever he wants, he'll have, and it's up to him, and blah, blah, blah. And then he sort of suffered as a consequence of being thrown to the wolves in Japanese matchmaking, and it got underdeveloped too quickly. Whether he's come around technically is hard to know. But given who else they've signed, it's hard to see how they wouldn't sign him. Issue could be money. Issue could be a lot of things. I'm not sure, because I think obviously an Olympic gold medalist would be a fairly hefty price, even for an unranked heavyweight. But I think your interest is real. It's just he got bad before he got good. So the question is, how good did he actually get? UFC lobbying in Florida. What are your thoughts on UFC lobbying politicians in Florida so that athletic commissions will no longer release TV revenue? Well, it's more than TV revenue. It would be live gate receipts. It would be merchandise sales. It would be tax information that they paid. It would be fighter salaries. It would be a lot of things. I'm obviously against it. I think more information is better. That information is currently released because of laws that value transparency and value freedom of public information. As I understand it, I could be wrong. I did see somebody that could be wrong, but their interpretation was you could only do it in mixed martial arts. You couldn't do it in boxing because in boxing, that what the UFC is asking would be prohibited by the Muhammad Ali Act. I don't know if that's true. It looked to be true based on a reading of the text, but I don't know that to be true. But it's an interesting theory. And the theory behind it is in the Muhammad Ali Act that if you take away that information, it robs the fighter of an ability to make informed choices at the negotiating table about their worth. That's what the argument is. Again, more information for the public is always better in the government realm, in the private sector realm. But it's stuff like this that really makes you wonder if UFC will ever go public, at least under the current ownership. Probably not. Luke, how exactly does MMA fighting make money? I was always curious what the main income sources for a website like MMAfighting.com are. Can you just give us a brief overlook, please? Um, ad rev. Ad rev on, on the sides. Ad rev on sponsorship through shows like Orioles MMA Hour. Pre-roll on videos. Ad rev. Adrian Broner, what did you think of his fight? I didn't see his fight. What happened was Glory 16 ended at like 9 p.m. local time in Denver, and a friend of mine had come to the arena. We went back to my hotel. I changed quickly, and God, I hadn't been to one since I was like 15. But there was like a David & Buster's right near the hotel, so we like scrambled over there, and we caught just the Mayweather fight. They sang 3 national anthems, which I thought was hilarious. So I didn't see the Broner fight. I have no comment about it. Luke, what is it with you and age? You seem to think that everyone over the age of 30 is a goner. I don't know if I think everyone over 30 is a goner. I would say everyone over 35 is a goner, with limited exception. Would you agree that Aldo versus McGregor would be the best-selling featherweight title pay-per-view to date? Yes, but that's not saying much. If McGregor beats Miller, do you see UFC giving him a title eliminator fight, and what do you think of that? There's no way they give him a title eliminator fight. I'd be shocked, especially if he looks bad and still beats Miller but looks bad. No way. No way. Korean prospect Choi Do-ho. I heard he was coming around. Where did I see him? Didn't I see he was booked for a fight? Could I be wrong about this? Oh, that's right. He was supposed to face Sam Sicily at 173. That's where I saw that. How far can he go? I have no idea. I have no idea. This one's not ranked or turned green, but I'm answering anyway. Luke, I was wondering, what advice would you give up-and-coming MMA fighters with regards to techniques? What techniques do you believe are really underutilized in MMA and would you like to see more? Believe it or not, I've actually been watching a lot more amateur MMA. I don't know why that is. I just sort of have been. Curious to see the differences, Man, it's crazy. When you watch a lot of UFC fights or even Bellator fights, and then you go back and watch amateur fights, it's like the world is really different. You can get some like legit people in amateurs, people who just got out of D1 or respected brown belts. Like goddamn, you got a long way to go. Blending. I think that there are a lot of people who either do 2 things. One, they train at bad MMA schools, or I should say 3 things. One, they train at bad MMA schools where they don't really learn as much sharp technique as they should. I think jiu-jitsu and MMA is as bad as it's ever been. So bad in the modern age, anyway. Like jiu-jitsu used to be better, and it's not very good anymore. That's one problem. I think another problem is they might do the opposite. They might go to like a specialized school where they learn like really good jiu-jitsu, but they have poor striking and poor wrestling, and so they don't have the specialized skills in other departments. And I think the third thing, the most important thing that I see right now on the amateur levels, is blending their game. Where guys might have wrestling and they might have a little bit of striking, and maybe they've got some great subs off their back and they're good at guard passing, right? They got enough to compete and win at the amateur level, but they have really poor blending about what you do in certain transition moments and how to put it all together to a fluid single attack from pillar to post. They have none of that. They've really segmented, regimented offense that's easy to maintain if you just fight each sort of component of it. That has been a huge problem that I've seen. I've seen good guys who should not lose fights, especially here locally, lose because they just didn't blend their game properly. And it's easier said than done, I understand, but it's really apparent. It's really apparent. Pat Barry KO. Yeah, I was there for that. What were your thoughts on the Barry KO? It looked brutal on TV. Do you think Glory will keep bringing him back even when he will get brutally KO'd? just for the sake of having a name on the card. Well, I certainly hope not. Although I don't know that I would say he's necessarily and totally done. Obviously, he's got some issues that we need to worry about. But I don't. I don't. I won't call it his retirement. I think it would be a little bit premature. But certainly having concern, I think is not. Yeah, I was there. It was he fell to my. I was to the right of where he fell. I was actually sitting next to Rico Verhoeven when it happened. Yeah, it was bad, man. It was bad. Here was my sense about that. Like, I think Trevor Whitman is an incredible MMA coach. I think he can produce UFC champions. I truly mean that. I think he's an amazing coach. But I don't know that that's necessarily the best environment to have a kickboxer who's just doing kickboxing. I could be wrong. I don't know that to be true. I'm just sort of wondering. I think if you want to train MMA, that might be an amazing place to go. Is it necessarily the best place to go to learn and practice and become proficient at a high level of kickboxing? Maybe the jury's still out on that one. And the truth of it is, as I understand it, Barry doesn't want to go to Holland to train. But when you go to these shows and you see all these guys, man, like Europe still just dominates kickboxing. They dominate it, man. If that's where the good stuff is, that's kind of where you got to go, and maybe that's what Pat Barry needs to do. I don't know. The other part about it, you have to sort of be honest about, is he's taken a fair amount of knockouts in his career. This was the first time it ever happened in kickboxing, though. He's lost other kickboxing fights. He's never been. He was stopped once by a nose injury for TKO, but he's never been just flat KO'd like that before. You have to wonder how much the years of accumulated damage in MMA are now affecting his ability to take a shot in kickboxing. So I think it's a little premature to say, oh well, that's it, and we're done with him. But I do think those two things sort of stood out to me. This is a bit of a groundbreaking performance for him in a negative way in kickboxing. And does he need to be a Core Hemmer's gym? Does he need to be a Mike's gym? Does he need to be at some place where he can get super high-level proficient kickboxing training? Again, maybe I'm wrong. It's just a hunch I had, but it's something worth thinking about. Someone says, Teddy Riner has shown some interest in MMA, but the Judo Commission in France kind of puts pressure on him not to talk about it. Man, that would be amazing. If you guys don't know, I don't know how to pronounce it, right? Is it Rinier, or I don't know how to pronounce the French, but Teddy Riner, R-I-N-E-R. He's this giant, just mount of muscle from France, who is, multiple-time world champion. I think he might be an Olympic champion at this point. He's like 6'9", and he just annihilates people in judo. He's amazing. If we get a guy like that in MMA, boy, that would be something. All right, changing the rules. Luke, Joe Rogan, among others, often mentions on UFC broadcast how silly the 12-6 elbows rule is, or even the knees to a downed opponent rule, and it has occurred to me that for the last 10-plus years, almost all of the current MMA rules have remained unchanged. Why have more adjustments to these rules not taken place? Is it because there has been no concentrated effort to change the regulations, or is it more that the procedure for adjustments is slow and convoluted? It's the latter. If to get the rules, each state basically either borrows the unified rules or a slight variation on the unified rules, or sometimes a fairly wide variation on the unified rules. So what has happened is that you have a regulatory scheme where the UFC isn't really able to be organizationally nimble in that way. They rely upon the commissions for the regulation, but to go state by state by state by state to get these changes made would be a massive undertaking. Not one that the UFC is incapable of doing, but simply, I don't know if it's a priority at this time. I do think, however, as one of our readers notes here, he writes, the percentage of fighters being finished is drying up. I firmly believe that some rule changes will aid in this. Every major sport has had key rule changes that open up their various games shot clock, icing, 5-yard bump, blah, blah, blah. MMA should be no different, and I totally agree. Now, what you do with those rules is different. There's different ways to enforce them, but I think what's happened is that we've gotten to a position where guys have found ways to use the rules to maximum benefit, both in terms of finishing and not finishing. Guys have gotten defensively better. Guys, in some cases, have gotten less risk averse. I just noted that I think jiu-jitsu was bad. When was the last time you saw a guy try to armbar somebody from mount? Get mount, pound on him, and then try and then do an armbar. It's almost never seen it. That's a super high percentage finish in jiu-jitsu. Not so much with the striking, but opening it up one way or the other. Anyway, long story short. I think at some point they're going to be forced into going and getting it regulated, but I think they're still working on New York. I think they're still looking for uniformity. The one thing I mentioned is I brought it up before. It's like when they go to these international territories where they don't have athletic commission sanctioning, this is their chance to experiment. And they have told me that they just want uniformity of product, which on some level I understand. On some level I don't. On some level I don't understand what you have the opportunity now to test these things in limited circumstances to see how much of a wider effect it has. And they don't want to do that. But I just think it's a big mistake. I think they should at least be some measure of changing the rules, even open scoring, 12-6 elbows, something about takedowns along the fence and referee separate, whatever you want to come up with. All different kinds of scenarios of things you can tweak to make things and the action move in a more dynamic way. And if you're doing it in a territory where you're already self-regulating and you're only making incremental adjustments, I think the risk is worth it. Luke, do you have any rituals you do before this chat every week? I can't help but think of you doing this while people walk by. He's doing the Matthew McConaughey Wolf of Wall Street thing. No. I just get my Diet Dew, I use the restroom, and then I let the process happen organically, dog. A couple weeks ago, you agreed that Ronda would beat Mayweather in an MMA fight. I didn't say she would beat her 10 times out of 10, but that it was certainly possible, yes. I want to know, at what point does Ronda not beat the boxer? Canelo 154, Golovkin at 160, Ward at 168, Kovalev at 175, and Klitschko. Klitschko, that's definitely just out. And we know Golovkin hits like a ton of bricks. Here's the deal. Up to maybe Klitschko, if she got a hold of these guys, she could throw them. The question is, if she can get a hold and throw them, what happens then? Because they're not going to scramble at that point. But because somebody like Canelo, Golovkin, Ward, and Kovalev just uppercut her into living death? Yes, of course. The issue is not, is one fight the ultimate arbiter of who would win? No, guys got to fight 100 times to figure it out what the ultimate arbiter is, unless there's 2 fights you just get blown the hell out. So could I see a case where Canelo wins all 9 or all 10? Sure. But I would expect Rousey to be able to win 1 out of 10 of those matches, to be honest. So we'll see. We won't see, but, you get the idea. Questions about Dana White. I've done those 1,000 times. Let's see. By the way, someone goes, can you do an impression of a bad MMA fan, please, because it's genuinely hilarious. Do you remember when I made fun of people talking? I did the "You Are Not Special" speech. Remember that? Talking about Nate Diaz and fighter pay, and I said, "You are not special." Remember all that? We got all bitter at me. Did you hear at UFC 172 the fan Q&A and the absolute diggity donk who asked Chuck Liddell about it? Man, Chuck Liddell, I hear all these fighters whining and crying. Meanwhile, he's like, he's drinking his beer and there's Old Bay on the rim of it because that's how they do it down there in Dundalk. And he literally it was like my cartoonish impression of detractors of raises in UFC fighter pay came to life. And not only came to life, came and actually like paraded his ignorance. It was amazing. It was amazing. People actually tweeted me about it too, because I didn't even hear it, and people tweeted me about it. It was shocking. Man, Chuck, you got all these fighters whining and crying, talking about $6,000 a year. That's more than I make in a single year. Blah, 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 blah. Like, yeah, donk, you're not special. So there you go. Prospect. What's your definition of a prospect? Erick Silva is often referred to as a welterweight prospect. I don't think many people realize he's older than 6 of 9 current UFC champions. It's a tough question. I think the answer is you stop being a prospect at some point past a certain age, right? So if you're 34, you're not really a prospect. That's one issue. Then the other issue is, have you been tested enough at a high enough level? And I think if Silva loses this fight, he's no longer a prospect. And I think even if he wins it, he turns to contender. Not like top contender, but either way, I think this is probably the demarcation line. Yeah, and Matt Brown, we certainly know, is not a prospect at all. He's too old and far too experienced. So it's a function of age and experience and where they are between the two. If you're 21, you're 12 fights in, and you're fighting on a prelim card, like Justin Scoggins, you're clearly a prospect. You know, it's a bit of a fluid definition. I don't think we have any hard lines, but those are the two sort of criteria I look at the most: is how much experience they have, what is their age, and what is the relationship between the two. This one's got 2 Ricks. I'll give it a third. Luke, what are your thoughts about giving warnings for fouls, or even merely reminding a fighter about their misconduct instead of immediately deducting points? At this point, every fighter knows what they can and cannot do, and I'd like to see more points being taken away instead of warnings, especially when things like grabbing the cage and defend a takedown can be the difference between winning and losing a round. For example, with speculation that Jose Aldo will fight Chad Mendes, well, it's not speculation, it's fact. I'm reminded of their first fight when Aldo grabbed the cage in order to stop Mendes' takedown. Perhaps the outcome would have been different if Chad was able to complete the takedown to score some damage. Amazing how Aldo gets a pass for this by most fans, but John Jones and the eye poking, it makes him so mad. Neither here nor there, I suppose. Yes, I've said it before. I'll make it very quick one more time. Go watch an HBO boxing event. I don't know about Showtime necessarily, but go watch an HBO boxing event. They spend a lot of time telling the audience about the officiating crew, the judges, their history as judges, the referee, his history or her history as referee, and then you see that very referee before the main event. You see previous footage of them talking to the fighter about what they expect and what they don't expect. And the reality is, you don't think Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather know the rules? They know the rules, right? They know what the issue is. But it's about telling them in advance, warning them. And we have fighters who have certain predilections, grabbing cage, eye poking. You would create an above board. So when you see them in the fight, you've already told them, if you do it one time, I'm taking a point away immediately. You already know you're not supposed to do it. I'm already warning you not to do it. Or you'll get one warning a second time. That's it. That is, I think, the solution. Set everything up ahead of time that everybody can see. All right. Should Dana White consider making himself less available to the media? God damn, more of these. I personally believe he comes off bad during scrums. The past year we saw him intimidate the media over steroids, act like a child with his comments about Cyborg, looking like Vanderlei, and attempt to use his platform as leverage during a contract negotiation. At what point is he hurting the UFC? I think there's still a huge portion of the fan base that likes that. I can tell you that there's a lot of people in the mainstream media who find that refreshing. I don't, but there's certainly a fair amount who do. And I think until that dynamic changes, that what you're talking about won't change either. What are your thoughts on the upcoming Bellator? This one's not Rex, but I want to read it anyway. What are your thoughts on the upcoming Bellator 119 card? It seems for these terrible cards, you don't hear Bjorn promote them at all. And the media won't either, since it's not worth their time. How can Bjorn actually put on these cards, especially since their pay-per-view is only 10 days away, which takes away from the absence, makes the heart grow fonder feeling for that pay-per-view? Yeah, it's amazing that Bellator is the #2 organization, and they're contributing to the oversaturation problem. Like I interviewed Kevin Kay at President Spike TV. Just the interview came out yesterday, and you saw. I thought he made one good point about this particular. He made several good points, but about this particular one idea, which was, well, people like the regularity of Bellator on Friday nights, and I believe that. I actually do believe that. I mean, the ratings have been up and down, but I think there's a certain truth to that. But I also think there's a question of how, the regularity becoming so much that it becomes uninteresting. What's more important, regularity or fascination, regularity or intrigue, regularity or anticipation? And I think in the fight game, there's an argument to be made that anticipation and intrigue and enthusiasm is a little bit more important than regularity. But I do think that there is some enjoyment derived from that regularity. I mean, but it's crazy. Like, why is Bellator running 26 shows a year? Why? You don't have the roster to run 26 shows a year. Especially if you want to move into pay-per-view and you want to really curate those cards to be the best of your product, both on the prelim and the pay-per-view portion. Like, why are you running so many cards that you're doing that? I'll never forget, man. To me, this is so symptomatic of what is wrong with Bellator. It's not that they don't have good guys. They do. They have a good, again, not the UFC roster, but a good roster for a number 2 on a good network like Spike TV. They've got that. They've got guys production staff who know exactly what they're doing. They can go week after week after week all across the country, and they can do all these things. Set up the cage, take it down. Production elements right in line. They know how to get. They know which guys can move the needle in which markets. They know all these things. And their 100th show came around, and all management, particularly Born Revenue, all they could be, compelled to say was just another show. Man, it's not another show. It's not. You got to take time to make things special, even if it doesn't feel real to you. If you're so deep in the process where your 100th show is just another show, something's wrong. Something's wrong. It's not another show, man. It's not. Everyone else is looking around being like, dude, you're at 100 shows. Like, what you gonna do to celebrate? And I know when we get all older, you turn 40 and 50. Your birthday is just another birthday, all right, whatever. 42, hey, what's the difference between that and 41? Nothing. But when you're 21, it's a big deal, man. When you turn 30, it's a big deal. There's certain milestones. You kind of have to take a little more time to celebrate. You got to take a little more time to bring people in and get people excited about. The problem with Bellator is not steak, man. It is sizzle. They got enough steak to sell. Like, the sizzle just, And when you have running this many shows, how can you do it? And I think Spike is trying. They've got Spike has 4 shoulder programs coming out, man. Unrivaled Michael Chandler. I don't know. I forget what it's called. The one-on-one show with Mo and Rampage. Countdown, and then Unfinished Business. Like, they're going all out with this. They're trying everything they can. I don't know that at this point having the show on Friday necessarily hurts those efforts. I mean, it's a time when Bellator is going to be on, but for me, it's just like, what is the point of having all this? So you can be a slave to a tournament structure? The Duke Kohea fight was not spectacular between a very green fighter and a woman who should be at 125, excuse me. But I've heard nobody comment on the most notable aspect of the match, Duke's throws and trips. Was it extremely obvious that she's been training with Ronda, and isn't that a very good sign for her development? Yes, on that level, sure. Absolutely. She was getting it from bad positions, too. Kohea was trying to get a body lock and get behind her. She was able to lock in the whizzer and then throw her over the top, Harai Goshi style, I think, for one of them. Maybe one of them was Uchimata. I don't remember. The problem was she couldn't finish them. Then she lost all the scrambles. You need to hit that throw like Nurmagomedov does, so that when they land with authority, and then you crash with them to the mat. You land on top of them as they fall, dude. That is when it gets ridiculously painful and puts you in a dominant position, So yeah, like, she clearly. That's why everyone was like, "Oh, that fight was bad." The fight was bad, but you could still see like seeds of development for Jessamine Duke. And Betcha Kohea did, I think, the best she could with the skills that she has. So, it's hard to expect much more than what you were getting. You booked a very green fighter against a fighter, as you mentioned, smaller and of limited skills. Not bad, certainly good, but not a world beater, probably not yet anyway. So that's what you're going to get. Like, it's not a big mystery. But I agree. There were some things you could see in Jessamine Duke's game that were like frustrating. It's like she would get close to the throw and then lose the scramble. So. Luke, what the F is up with Nick Lentz and Eddie Wineland fights being curtain jerkers for this weekend's card? I don't know. Someone else wrote me about that too. That is a good question, and I don't know the answer to it. Remember how Danny Castillo didn't admit it, but it was basically widely known that Castillo was put lower on the card at UFC 172 because he turned down a fight. I think at the Gomi fight. Maybe they turned something down and they got put lower on the card. I don't know. Is it retribution for not playing ball? I don't know. Is it because they just needed to give him the fight and they had to put him on the card? I don't know. Could be harmless. Could be bad. It could be somewhere in between. I don't know. But it was weird, man. You got some guys higher on the card. You're like, these guys are terrible. How is Nick Lentz and Eddie Wineland getting short shrift? Eddie Wineland might be the highest ranked guy on the card. Think about that. And he's fighting on where? Let me find this. Eddie Wineland is the opening of the Fox Sports 2 card. Let me see where he's ranked. Albeit. Yeah, Eddie Wineland's number 4. He's the highest ranked guy on this card. What? And it's not even like he's boring. You know what I mean? It's not even like he's a fun fighter. I mean, I know they got to build that card too, but like, Lord Almighty. Rico Verhoeven. I saw you interviewed Rico Verhoeven last week at Glory. What do you think of his potential? If there was no Glory, he would already made his MMA debut because he's training MMA for years now, and he mentions a lot of the time that he wants to make the step one day. Where do you see him in the end of MMA? He's huge, man. I shook his hand. I was like, God damn, he's a big boy. I don't know. Without having seen anything else besides his striking, I don't know. But he's got a good style of striking. You know, busy, volume. Proactive on offense. I think those things will lead him to success, provided he has everything else in place. And he's good size too, you know. What is the UFC's reluctance to putting Aldo on Fox? It seems like a perfect match since he doesn't really draw on pay-per-view. And perhaps a Fox headliner would give him much-needed casual exposure. They've had non-English speaking fighters headline before, so I don't get it. They could have easily pegged Aldo Mendez 2 for the Fox card in July. Your thoughts? Right, because that's the one right before August 2nd, right? My guess is, I think the one is that he doesn't speak English. That makes him a bit of a hard sell. 2, you kind of have to come around to the idea that I personally have no issue with how Jose Aldo fights. 0, none. But in a world where Jake Shields is being cut after being in a potential title eliminator fight for reasons that we know are real, under that measurement, Jose Aldo fights a little bit boring, you guys. Not to me, but by that standard. That's kind of the truth. He kind of doesn't give it his all. He fights just enough to win. Again, I don't have a problem with that. He can do whatever the hell he wants. I want the best fighters to fight. I don't care if they fight boring. That's how much I care about fighting. But if we're looking around what the general zeitgeist, flavor, preferences are, predilections are, it's for guys who fight a little more exciting than Jose Aldo. That's a fact. He's been a little bit boring recently, and I think there might be some concerns about that. Maybe that's not the chief concern. Maybe that's 10%, 5%, 1%, but I would suspect that that's in there. Plus, they've already sort of positioned him as a pay-per-view guy. Like, do they want to retract that back to Fox now? I don't know. Although I guess they're doing that for Pettis. Or they did. No. Is Pettis? Let me see something about Anthony Pettis. Oh. I guess they haven't booked that fight yet. All right, anyway, whatever. Why should inactivity be a requisite for the rankings? It's a good question. I mean, presumably you're ranking guys who are actively jockeying for position. What does actively mean? Right? Actively within a year, actively within 2 years, actively within 6 months. What is that demarcation line that you're using? It's a good question. I don't have a good answer for it, so that tells you how good your question is. If Erick Silva moved to Albuquerque and joined Greg Jackson's gym, he'd become a legitimate title contender. I have no idea. I have no idea. He takes too many risks and doesn't have a game plan. I see a fighter with tools and athleticism, but he lacks all the things that Greg Jackson could bring to the table. Probably could improve with Greg Jackson, but I don't know that this would be some sort of cure-all. Luke, do you have any tips or suggestions for someone about to take their first BJJ class, such as how you can tell if you have a good instructor? I wrestled all 4 years in high school, but that was a while ago. I was looking for a fun way to work out. If you wrestle in high school, you should be fine. I recommend you should definitely go to a school where the minimum level of teacher is purple belt. I would recommend that. Not to say you can't get good instruction from a blue belt. I'm not saying that, but typically speaking, I found that schools that let blue belts be instructors, there's a problem of quality there. Not always, but I'm sure you can point to exceptions. But generally speaking, I like to see purples are better. And you go to Marcelo's school, it's nothing but black belts teaching. It's crazy. And world champions at that. Now, obviously, everyone can't get that, but that's one thing. So see the level of your instructor. 2. See how the instruction is broken down. How much time do you spend doing warm-ups? How much time do you spend doing instruction? How the instruction is taught? Do they pair you off correctly? And if they give you time to spar, or if you're really, really new, what they call flow rolling, which is where you're going like 50%. You let guys get things on you. You just sort of get out of them. But the only thing I can give you a tip about, if you wrestled, then you should be a pretty tough guy. The key to jiu-jitsu is just keep showing up. Just keep showing up. At first, it's going to make no sense, and you're going to get submitted all the time, probably. With wrestling, it'll be a little bit harder for you, especially against other white belts. But if you roll against any blue or purple, they're just going to catch you all the time. Forget about blacks and browns. So just keep showing up. But what you want to see is did they space out enough where you got a good warm up, you got enough attention to detail on your. So it should be like a 15-minute warm up, roughly 30 minutes of technique, and then 15 minutes of rolling if you can get it in. And then also, by the way, it's not just one class. Does the next class pick up on what you did before? Because another problem is you'll go in on Tuesday and it'll be, oh, let's do omoplatas, and then the next day it'll be, hey, let's do arm bars from the mount. There should be some consistency about that, That's a good one. Since Diaz was removed from the UFC rankings for turning down fights, then why is Overeem still on the UFC rankings since Dana publicly said he turned down JDS several times? No idea. Great question. Bellator, only 2 weeks away from their pay-per-view debut. 10 days, really. And is it me or is Rampage the only one trying to promote this thing? The guy has been on every late-night show he can get in, and in my opinion, doing everything he can to promote the show. Your thoughts and predictions on pay-per-view numbers? Well, he's the only one that these networks want. I had a caller on my radio show. I host the Sirius XM Fight Club on Mondays, 4 to 6 on Channel 92, and someone called in and was like, man, why don't these guys' managers just call up Good Morning America and get on there? Like you dumbass. You think that's really possible? Oh, just call up the top morning show, on broadcast TV. Why don't you call up Good Morning America? Why don't you call up the Today Show? They'll bump Al Roker for Alexander Shlemenko. That's what they'll do. Your weather reports are going to be brought to you today by Alexander Shlemenko. It doesn't work that way. It's hard for UFC guys to get on there. You know, one of the reasons why people can say what they want about the Rampage acquisition. They've got 2 wins out of him, however legitimate you want to view them. And he's going on late night TV shows that no other Bellator fighter, including Tito Ortiz, can even get an invite on. And he's promoting a pay-per-view. That makes him valuable. That makes him valuable. That's what happens. Like, it's hard to get invites on those shows. You got to be a much bigger star than any MMA fighter really is. And that's why Rampage got on there and other places too. It's not like these guys are getting invites and turning them down or even not pitching these shows. These shows only take what they want with their limited time. Rampage is the only one from their perspective that makes any sense. I mean, you have to be kind of clueless to say something like, can't believe these fighters' managers ain't calling up Good Morning America, whining and crying. Why do you think Tough Mexico went with bantamweights and featherweights? Shouldn't they have been a little more diverse, like bantamweight and middleweight? Well, first of all, it's not Tough Mexico. It's Tough Latino America, number one. And second of all, maybe because bantamweights and featherweights were the majority of what they had. I sort of followed this already. The next 8 UFC cards are headlined by Matt Brown, Erick Silva, TJ Dillashaw, Renan Barão, Mark Munoz, Gegard Mousasi, Fabio Maldonado, Stipe Miocic, Rustin Havilov, Ben Henderson. I like that one. Dagotinov versus Johnson. That's good. Tahuna versus Marquardt, and Swanson versus Stevens. So of 3 of those, I like. Oh, sorry, of 8 of those, I like 3. I'm thinking Dana's advice is right. It's time to start skipping cards. Again, vote with your dollars. Your attention dollars, your financial dollars, vote with them. Luke, are you at least a little nervous to fall under Dana White's wrath because Nate retweeted your post about how he might deserve a raise right now? No, because he retweeted Mike Chiappetta's article on Fox Sports. That's what I linked. It wasn't mine. And I even put Mike Chiappetta in it. Let's see. What do you think of the Kyoji Horiguchi versus Daryl Montague fight? Very excited about it. I like Horiguchi to win, but that is a very, very good fight. Very good fight. What was your favorite moment from the last Glory event? The times where I didn't mess up on air. Those are all my favorite times. Luke, Bjorn Rebney more or less stated that the Tito Ortiz Alexander Shlemenko is a freak show fight. In your opinion, does this help or hurt the credibility of the event coming up? I seriously doubt that impacts the credibility in a negative way. Ooh, Woodley Rory. Who do you have in this one? Man, that's a tough one. I'm probably going to go Woodley, but I don't know. I really don't know. There's still a lot of misconceptions on this by fans. Can you explain briefly how Bellator makes money? Are they currently profitable? Do they need pay-per-view to survive? Are they shifting to pay-per-view? Are they primarily going to remain a TV product? Well, Jesus, I don't have time for this one. I'll answer this one later. Trying to read one here before this thing ends. Someone goes, I would watch the S out of Alexander Shlemenko doing the weather. All right, me too. Me too. What do you think of Mendez's comments on McGregor not even being in the same league skill and talent-wise? I don't know if he's right, but based on what we've seen, he seems to be right. But McGregor could prove it. McGregor is in a developing process, so it's like you're trying to stop him at one point in time, but he's going this way. Question is, does he go far enough? I don't know. But saying he's objectively one thing or the other, in a month he could be better than he is today. Eventually, guys sort of level out. He's not the level out stage. We just don't know. Chile, Peru, Colombia, Uruguay, Panama, Argentina have a better economy than Mexico. Why U.S. only focuses on Mexico? Because A, they have a much richer tradition of combat sports, even including Argentina, and their economy is more in the boom stage. Colombia is growing, but it's not in the boom stage. Peru, same thing. Panama, although is in a bit of a boom, but it's a much smaller market. And Argentina, I think, is inevitable. They'll come around to Argentina. But also, Argentina is having some economic problems, too. Let's see. Let's do one or two more, and then we get out of here. Sure. Luke, I just had my third daughter. I will officially have to work the rest of my life. Can I get a shout out for my new daughter, Lily? Hi, Lily. Thanks for ruining your father's, Jake's, life. I tease. All right. Do your Washington Wizards stand a chance? Against the Pacers? Yes. Against the Heat? I don't think so. Any dark horses for Tough 20? Someone took the words right out of my mouth. Joanne Calderwood. Keep an eye out. Tisha Torres, too. What do you think of the Eddie Bravo Invitational pay scheme? I haven't seen it. Jesus. All right, I need one more. World Series of Fighting, go out of business in 2014, yes or no? I'll say no. And then one more, and we'll kill this. Lots of questions about McGregor as a future champ. The answer is no one knows. No one knows. Are you interested in Martinez versus Cotto? Yes. Which flyweights had the best chance of beating Demetrius Johnson? Dodson, I'd say he has a good chance. Scoggins, not yet. Lineker, no. Benavidez, no. Any fighter not listed. Obviously, he's going to fight Vago-Utinov, so I don't know. But Dodson is and Scoggins maybe down the road. Scoggins and one of these guys like McGregor in this motion. And the question is, how far they go? We don't know. How far they go before they start doing that? That's the issue. All right. Follow me on Twitter at SBN Luke Thomas. I thank you all for joining me. I appreciate it. It's been the total focus here on this total focus. So thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. You may email me at luke.thomas@sbnation.com. And again, tweet at SBN Luke Thomas. Thank you very much for all your total focus. Until next time, stay frosty.